the date that we consider Tottenham as title challengers will be. It's not today. It's not today. It's not today. Okay, so and I see you there at the top of the table. Here's a question I'm going to ask Flav later in the week, but I'd like to ask you as well. Is it better that Arsenal are there above you, but you're above them on something as annoying as goals scored? or is it annoying that they're there?
To be honest, it's so strange. I don't... doing what I do, it's hard to be a standard fan. So, you know, but I've turned into one again this year with Ange Postecoglou. I just have. I've got the love back. It's not something you would expect at this stage. I think in terms of that battle with Arsenal, it's 8 games in, so I think it annoys them a little bit probably that, you know, Spurs are ahead on a goal scored or something.
No, it doesn't. What?
Is it about? Do you think the right strategy for a Tottenham fan is to kind of go big now? Because I think there's an overall feeling that this won't last.
I think Ange said it perfectly, and I think he's one of the only managers that I've heard say this. And I think he's spot on. Just like, you know, he was asked by, I think it was a Spurs interviewer, saying, you know, do we need to temper expectations, the fans? He says, no, let them enjoy it.
Yeah.
You know, like, football is so much of football is struggle. So enjoy the moments when they are there. And if it's left with egg on your face, it's left with egg on your face. Yeah. But, you know, I think if you're starting to say, we're definitely going to win the league, we're the best team in it, then, all right, fine. That's a bit, you know, preemptive. But I just think that, just enjoy it.
I think the problem with modern football fandom is that there are receipts everywhere.
Yeah.
And also, you know, there's so much hyperbole.
I think what happens is people create fake opposition. So they'll say, Spurs fans are saying that they're going to win the league. No, one Spurs fan has said that, got absolutely cooked on Twitter, and then everyone's now going, well, there was a whole thing with Arsenal briefly about Saka having a poor start to the season. So every time he scores now, people are like, oh, and they said he had a poor start to the season. No, about 2 people did.
Yeah. That's true. So, and I get, even like I say articles, I got put in an article once saying, oh, the manager's got to, something like the manager's got to go or something. They'd found 3 tweets on Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank or something, and I just said that's not a good enough performance or something like that.
And then they twist it into,
they take that into that. So you're right, exactly. There's just so much noise as well. But I think, you know, as content creators, we both kind of live in the grey. But the starting point kind of has to be, and I think that's why I love the podcast, is the starting point often with the ripple effect is that we go heavy and then we can find our place in the grey. So speaking of which, what is the date that Tottenham will be title challengers? So far Tottenham have 20 points from 8 matches and sit top of the table. Their run of fixtures is favourable, very favourable. So you've got Fulham at home, guaranteed 3 points. Don't worry about that. Palace away. Lots of injuries at Palace currently. As a result. Chelsea at home. Okay, tricky, fair enough. But, we'll get on to Chelsea later on because their fixtures aren't great either. Then you've got Wolves away. Then you've got Villa at home. But the defining date where they will be anointed Premier League challengers could well be the 2nd of December where they play Man City away. So with those games, Fulham, Palace, Chelsea, Wolves, Villa on the horizon, how many points do you think Tottenham should get from now until the Man City game?
Wow.
So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 games. Fulham at home, Palace away, Chelsea at home, Wolves away, Villa at home.
I mean, they are technically at the moment, if each game was to be played, they would be favourites for all of those games. But as we all know, football doesn't work like that, and you do have to have the one game at a time approach. I've never quite understood what title challenges means. Like, it kind of use it. Is there a date? Is there because it sounds silly to say, but until it's impossible, everyone is challenging for. Everyone's trying to win the game. Everyone's trying to win the next game at the start of the year before any game's been played. Everyone is a challenger. So of course, I'm not saying that you would expect Luton to put up a title challenge.
Sure,
but I get what you're saying, and I think it's a really tricky one because I think Spurs at the moment they're doing fantastic. And they're certainly not hanging on by a thread. But I think it will take one injury to Maddison, Bissouma, keeper, centre-halves, and then all of a sudden, now you're bang in trouble. I don't think Arsenal or City have that problem to the same... Well, maybe City do with Rodri, but I don't think they have that issue to the same extent. But then again, you can have a Leicester City where every single of their key men stayed fit the entire year, had no other focus. So many things can and will happen. At the moment, they are top of the league, and that is what they're going to continue to try to do, as anyone would. I don't. In terms of how many points they're going to get in the next 5 games, again, it's so hard to say. They should win every game, but people probably thought that Spurs would batter Luton, and they don't score any of the first 3 chances they get in the first 7 minutes, and then it turns into an awkward affair.
Yeah,
and then a sending off. So football changes in a second.
From the perspective that you have, how good is Udogie? Because I've been watching him and I really like him. I think he's got quite a unique role in that Spurs team. But from an individual coach's perspective, how good do you think he is? Because I think there's I see personally quite a disparate opinion on him. There's some people who are like, this is the truth, and some people say he's massively overrated.
No, I think he's immense. Yeah, I think he's immense. He's a pure footballer. He has this innate ability. He's had it a few times. So he got a yellow card in both Saka and Salah early on in the game, I think. And
he managed it well.
He managed it really well, but he's still able to engage in physical duels and come out on top quite comfortably. He's so strong and powerful, but he's one of those players as well that he's so technically efficient and clean that he's able to just glide with the ball, and the ball doesn't really change how he runs. It's just completely natural. He's got a lovely instinct and awareness of where to be at the right time. He's got a lovely disguise in his first touch. He's a proper footballer. You could put Udogie in. There's a few times he's popped up in on the right hand inside right channel, and he's found something out of it. He's just a pure footballer. I think he's immense. Yeah,
I'm always fascinated by like the mix of ingredients that can make a team better than what you would see on paper. So, for example, Newcastle, even at the weekend, you look at some of the players on that pitch, and I'm still trying to sort of. It sounds really harsh, but kind of wash away the name.
Yeah.
Because of what he's done. And again, say that PSG game last week, when you see the players on the opposition side, and then you see that Newcastle side and what they're doing, I felt this isn't a sort of charged question, but honestly, can you see some of Arsenal last season in Tottenham this season? Because 100%. I think there's a lot of players last year that you were sort of, say Gabriel and even Saliba, who people were going. I remember doing a video saying he will be the starter for Arsenal this year, and people were going, "What are you on about? It's going to be Ben White playing that position." Now there's
now he's better than Maldini. It's crazy. Crazy how these things work out.
There's a tactical change that obviously made a bit of a difference, right? But the power of the manager, and then the adding of expectation, because that's the sort of the next wave that you're dealing with as an Arsenal team now. So how much do you think it's on? How much has Postecoglou done here to sort of change these players, or has he actually got better players than we thought he had because it was just so ugly last year?
Jokes aside, I genuinely really like Ange. I think he, and I think that's important. And I think it's like, well, so what's football? No. I think having someone who understands people and the way he speaks and the way he. We were speaking about it before. You're saying about you can go up to UEFA A. If you can't synthesize information, if you can't get your message across, if you can't speak to people and look them in the eye and recognize that today that person needs this, today that person needs that, it doesn't matter. You can't. Your ideas, you can have the best ideas in the world. If you can't get them across and people don't follow you, it doesn't matter. So credit to Ange, and I think something that's changed in my football thinking, even over the last 6 months, is the importance of environment. I think I used to see it more as like, well, that player's better than that player, so he should,
Yes.
If you put out 11 players who are better than the other 11 players, you should win. I think environment may be the most important thing in football. It may be like, in terms of the tactical environment, in terms of the, sound like Roy Keane, dressing room, but all these things that I do think, because you're right, you look at certain players in certain teams, and how many examples do we have of a player who looks absolutely dog in a certain team, Udogie, and didn't work, and then comes.
Didn't need to say that.
Comes into another team and just looks absolutely insane, and you realise it's weirdly. I compare it to Havertz in a sense. In Havertz is losing his way, in my opinion, in the midfield, and I don't want to talk about Havertz particularly, but I think what happens when you move into centre forward and why he looks better is his actions are simplified. It's more clear, in my opinion, what a centre forward at Arsenal needs to do in terms of the simplification of I only have a few options. I hold the ball up, I give it off. As a winger, and you'll be able to speak about this better than me, but in my opinion, as a winger, your actions are kind of limited. There's only a certain amount of things you can do from that position. As a midfielder, there's loads of things you can do. And I think when you reduce that down and you have only a certain amount of things you can do, it simplifies it. And I think that sort of extrapolates out to a wider thing where you put someone in the right environment, you give them the tools and say, you only but you only have to do these simple actions. It can simplify what it is. And Andrew's clearly got his message across and said, look, here's what I need you to do. It's super simple, it's super clear, and the environment then takes everything.
And somehow quite different styles, I would say, with Arteta and Postecoglou, but styles that I think fit the clubs. Like, so for Postecoglou, it feels like obviously there's a clear philosophy there, but it's actually a sort of he's giving them a bit more freedom.
Yeah.
Whereas with Arsenal, I think that it's far more structured, and kind of actually the difficulty this year. So what I think is interesting as well, which clouds a lot of it, and I said this in my match reaction for Arsenal, was the fact that, like, you can say, okay, well, this proves that they're title challengers for Arsenal, but it's actually just about the winning and losing creates this sort of fog massively. Like, Man City aren't going anywhere. They are missing Kevin De Bruyne, and that is a huge part of this. And Arsenal, we don't know where they are just yet, but in terms of that structured nature of them defensively, I can't totally figure out if you've lost an element of fluency and freedom. I think you have. Yeah. But you've created a new kind of resolve. And right now, because you're getting a win against Everton, because you're getting a win against Man City when it's not free-flowing stuff, whereas last year, just popping off teams, it's a hard one to truly define right now in October.
I think from my analysis and my viewpoint, I think we've lost access to the central areas. That's one of the main problems. It's partly because teams are blocking the middle, but we've lost access to zone 14, whatever you want to call it, that access into that area. Now, last season, Arsenal had the highest, I think we had like 5 players in the top 5 for most progressive passers in the entire league in terms of volume of passes, right? We had Thomas Partey, Martin Odegaard, Ben White, Zinchenko. This season, we have Declan Rice is our first entry at 16th in terms of progressive passes, in terms of volume. What we do have is carriers. We have people on the wing in terms of Sacco and Martinelli who have unbelievable progressive passes receive numbers and unbelievable progressive carries numbers. But what that means is you enter the final third much further to the side, and it takes longer and it's harder to get in.
Or you have to go back round.
You have to go back round to get in. So I think that's part of it. Part of it is losing Thomas Partey because he's one of our most progressive players from the centre, and we saw it with the goal at the weekend. He just goes direct straight up to Tomiyasu, and who knocks it down. So yeah, I think that now we're on this. I think the structure element is interesting because I do think with the addition of Declan Rice, you can't just take Thomas Partey out and put Declan Rice in and expect the same results, because then you underrate what Thomas Partey did, but you don't respect that Declan Rice has a different skill set. He has a different way of approaching it, so you have to approach progression from a different way. That may be a choice, and I'm sure it is. Let's be clear. I'm sure Arteta's thought about this. I know this. Arteta doesn't. No, I'm sure he thinks about this. But I think I think we're maybe sacrificing a little bit of that exciting fluidity that we had last season, which maybe you're seeing under Ange now, for a little bit of defensive stability. Because I thought that game against Man City was our best out of possession performance maybe ever under Arteta. Huge claim, but maybe
the one thing I would come back to that as time progresses, where you may have the lack of ability to break teams down, because I'm kind of mixed 2 points here. First of all, defensively, I thought Arsenal were really, really strong. I do also think that as a back four without the ball, they were able to stay within the 18-yard box a lot more easily than they would against a different Man City team where they played with a bit more width.
Yeah, natural width.
So that allows you to stay compact, which I think makes life a little bit easier. Compact. The second thing that I want to talk about is in terms of going forward, and because this is the thing, we will analyse a Man City game, but that's not going to... Some people are saying that, like, oh, well, you get 6 points against Man City, that could be the difference. I disagree. I actually think it's a mix of both. Obviously, you need to be taking those points because they are 6-pointers, not literally, but you have to be able to beat the other guys. And forgive me if it wasn't you, but I think when you were on last time, you were kind of talking about Jurgen Klopp with Liverpool. When they got to the title, there was a sort of it was a bit more free flowing, and then they had that good season, but then the year after that, it was a case of, oh, okay, can we almost like grind down teams and make sure we're not conceding goals?
It's
and
a good
this
point,
feels
so
like
I wouldn't
the
have
next,
said it.
right. This feels like in terms of that development of a team, for Arsenal, the positive spin on it, which I think is the truth, because it feels a far less flimsy Arsenal. I think you will be able to beat the 1-0 to the Arsenal could become quite a regular thing here.
100%.
But I mean, the problem I feel like you have a little bit is there does seem to be such a need for Saka and Martinelli to be there and fit and free flowing as well, because they're so important to you guys.
Yeah, and kind of as you were mentioning, football changes so quickly. It might be that Trossard comes in as a left day and then that solves it. Or whatever. Who knows? Well, from your perspective, what do you see as Ange's style? Because, like, obviously, to some degree, you can see it, but I feel like someone who's a fan, obviously works with players and stuff, you'd be able to explain it better. What do you see that as?
So, in comparison to sort of like, you made a point earlier, James, about do you see last year's Arsenal and this year's Spurs? As managers, you talk about Arteta and Guardiola, they're one end of the spectrum in terms of they like to control as much as they can. In possession and out of possession. So they almost try to find an algorithm or a formula to win.
Sure.
And if you do A, B, C, it should lead to D, E, F. That's their idea.
Which you saw brilliantly last year, because you generally had the same team and you had the same passing networks every single game. And people knew what they were going to do, but they were doing it so quickly that they were able to both control and hurt the opposition.
Yes, but the problem with that is that it is easy to read. You are able to do tons of pre-game analysis on it in terms of the opposition. So managers like that, they are constantly, they don't change the entire philosophy, but they have to constantly tweak what goes within that philosophy. So you saw Pep used to do the inverted fullbacks. He done John Stones moving into midfield last year. So the ideas don't change, but the approach changes just to keep teams guessing. And just slightly different in terms of course, there's structure, but he allows a lot more freedom. It's a lot harder to predict what Spurs are going to do and how they're going to create chances. 1 second, Maddison will be popping up and picking the ball up off of a Dogi deep. The next minute, he's playing combination football on, the right-hand side with Kulusevski and Pedro Porro, and he's just an example. 1 minute, they've had a tactic a few times this year of Perisic coming on and, putting in dangerous balls quite early. On the other end of the spectrum, you have Manor Solomon that likes to go more weave in and out. So the everything is the whole idea is about being brave, attacking, intense, aggressive on the ball, aggressive off the ball. But within that, of course, there's framework and a structure, but there is more freedom within that. So you can see players, they feel free on the pitch and they're being best utilised to do what they do best. I personally don't believe, I've said this a few times, I don't believe in positions. I don't know, like, you can have a left winger like Martinelli, who is a left winger on paper, but then you can have Jack Grealish, a completely different left winger. Someone asked me before the game if Saka isn't going to play, can Havertz play on the right wing? And most people will say, no, of course he's not a right winger. I'm like, well, okay, he's not a right winger, but what is he? He's someone that is best at arriving inside the box. He's someone that is very good at, potentially linking play quickly, ghosting into areas. He can, win aerial duels now and again. So can that be done from that right wing zone? Well, of course it can.
Yeah, sure.
But if you're asking him to get the ball deep and wide and asking him to go 1v1 and carry the ball into the box, well, no, we can't. But that's the same whether you put him in that area of the pitch or that area of the pitch. So I think it's more about best utilising what they've got. And I think that's what Ange is doing really well as well.
I think it's what do you need and where do you want to get to as well. So, like, say I thought Gabriel Jesus in that game was a poor man's Saka to a point, because he wanted the kind of ball to feet out wide and then could kind of drive a little bit. And there was one moment in particular where it felt like Zinchenko got it to Jorginho, got it to Odegaard, and you could see it open up.
Yeah.
And he wanted Gabriel Jesus to start in that position and drive in behind and get in behind. So to your point, but he didn't. And it sort of got played to him and they were safe. Man City were safe. Whereas what you're saying, say like with Havertz, and when you're talking about positions and things like that, it's about what's going to get you where you want to be. So if you played Havertz as a right winger, you could, Zinchenko, who was struggling to get the ball through that area, he could play a sweeping ball to Havertz, who could win a duel and knock it into the area that I've just described that I wanted Jesus to be in the first place. And you could have played Jesus as a central striker, already gambling on that moment. So there's so many different ways that it can be played out. What I like about, what I think is really positive about both teams right now is that, and Arsenal fans will turn their nose up at the Tottenham element of it, or some will, and vice versa. But I think the principles and the beliefs around Arsenal and what their fans want to see is. And I saw this. They did on Sky did this word association thing with Arteta, and they said, "What's the word you think of when you think of Arsenal?" And he said class. Exactly. He said class, but class. And what Arteta's done is he's dragged them up to a point, but kind of alongside them in terms of his career trajectory. But he's set standards, very clear standards, and this is where we need to get to, and this is how we behave. And Aubameyang or Ozil or whoever, off you go, because this is where we've got to be, because we are class, we are all those things. And it's worked, especially with young, malleable players. With Tottenham, it's interesting. It's such a different way. For me, it's not the come on, we're going over here. It's a sort of father figure going, it's okay. It's a little nudge towards, and it's a freedom because that's Tottenham have been. I think for Tottenham, it's about how, and I think that's really come into focus this year because they haven't won those things. So it has to be about how.
I actually think it's harder to have long-term success with. And again, every situation is different, but it can be harder to have long-term success with an Arteta approach because it's all governed on what he sees and what he wants and their routes and their plans and their formulas. You constantly have to adapt them, and to keep having the change in the formula and to keep making it work, that can be really, really difficult because there's only a certain amount of possibilities he's giving the players on the pitch. Obviously, anything can happen, and players will always have an element of instinctiveness, but I'm talking long-term. So there's only, the players have to put in the plans that he's wanting. So if they get blocked off or they get red or they get closed, they find it difficult. Whereas with someone like Ange, there's infinite amount of possibilities because there's no, you must do it this way. Yeah. Of course, there's ideas and of course there's certain things. People speak about the inverted fullbacks as if it's it's not a guarantee. It's not a set in stone thing. They were struggling versus Man United in the first half with inverting their fullbacks because Man United's forward line found it easier to cut those passing lanes because they were narrow. All they done in the second half was stretch one of them wider. Porro, if I remember right, put him wider, and all of a sudden Man United had a big issue. So it's more about, and of course Arteta's constantly adapting, but it is harder to have long-term success doing it my way. In terms of you must do it this way again and again, unless you have the blank checkbook.
Well, I think he has to see it first, and that's what Pep Guardiola has done. Yeah, and if there are those comparisons there, so the pressure is on Arteta, but as long as he can see it first, and I think the other thing is from say like that Fergie and Pep point of view, there's going to come a moment actually in the next 2 years where Arteta will have to be quite ruthless again. Yeah, with one or two, maybe not all of them, and I think what will be difficult there is that they're. And maybe it's happening with David Raya, obviously in Ramsdale now. But you have to have, you have to keep evolving it to keep your sort of grip on it. You saw that with Fergie. We've been watching the Beckham documentary recently. There were those moments he goes, "Well, okay, you're gone." You can more and more you hear about Fergie and Man United, the more manipulation you can see there, and that's something that kind of Arteta will have to do. But as long as he can see it first, you're in a really good place.
He's proven he's proven he's a fantastic tactical mind and a coach. So I would back him to be able to keep adapting that. But it is a very difficult thing to be able to do. Of course, it is. Longevity is so difficult.